once becoming a Christian, my problems didn't end, but becoming a Christian gave me the solutions to my difficulties in my life. But some of the biggest things that I've struggled with is depression is still an issue. And something I've just discovered recently, in my walk with the Lord and talking with Him and praying with Him, is He's just been speaking to my heart and saying that, I'm not going to change necessarily the nature of who you are, but I'm going to give you the ability to overcome those things, those struggles in your life. And so depression is something that I constantly have to work on with Him. Otherwise, it's something I'm going to slip back into. It's the nature of who I am. And so if I'm not in the Word regularly and I'm not praying regularly, then I slip into that depression. It's part of the weight of the world that we live in. And so once I get in that depressive state, it makes it so difficult to get into the Word. And it makes it difficult to pray because Satan loves to get you down in that place. And then he starts telling you all these things like you're an awful person, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're not smart, that Jesus couldn't love you, how could anybody love you? And that's what Satan does. And so he wants to keep you down so you don't pray, you don't get in the Word. And I know that that's my struggle. And so I have to make a conscious decision to keep going.
When I got out of high school, I ran around with a crowd that was not a Christian, that were not all of them were Christians, and that was a big challenge in my life. I always wanted to do the right thing, but it's really hard a lot of times when you're with people that are not doing the right thing to continue to do the right thing. And then the older I get, the more committed I am to wanting to do the right thing, to wanting my influence to be good on others, because the older I get, the more I realize how important your influence is on others. And so now the biggest challenge is for me as far as being a Christian is making sure that I make time for my personal walk with God.
When I decided to come back to Christ, I had to change my entire life around as quickly as humanly possible. I had to give up a lot. I had to give up women. I had to give up drugs, booze. I had to give up my attitude on life. I had to give up my worldview. I had to change the very core of who I am. I knew I had to do a lot of things cold turkey. And there was a lot of things that was making me physically sick because I had to stop. Years later, my wife was given a prescription of Oxycontin. I didn't think about it at the time, but it was my favorite candy of my younger years. And I remember she fell asleep. Her newborn baby's asleep. And I remember picking up that bottle of pills. And I had a choice. Sure, it was tempting at the time, but I was excited that I had the ability to have control over my life again. It told me that I'm going to make it.
The biggest challenge that I have faced since I became a Christian was watching my son fall away from God and fall away from church. I felt so guilty, like maybe that was my fault, and it was so hard to watch that happen. And I cried out to God and said, I don't understand why this is happening, but I did the best I could. And sometimes I ask God, why aren't you working on him? And then it dawns on me that he's still working on me.
Well, for a long time, one of the biggest ones was looking for the right person to spend the rest of your life with. I mean, I prayed about it and thought about it, prayed about it some more. And then Michonne came along and everything changed. I mean, I literally told my roommate 2 days before I met Michonne that I was just going to give up and be single like Paul was. And then Michonne showed up at church one day. We've literally been together more days than not ever since.
As a teenager, as a grown up, admitting that I'm a Christian, letting people know that I'm a Christian. I don't have a problem with it now so much, but in high school, you just didn't go around bragging about it, or that's the way we were made to feel. You keep it quiet, type of thing.
The biggest challenges to my faith are multiple episodes of, I think it's when I felt like I could control things, that I could fix things. You know, life gets stressful and problems come along, things don't go the way you think they should. And, you know, there's a time that you should rely on friends and family. And when I say that, I mean the church. I had this feeling of, I need to keep people from knowing about it. This is my problem. I need to take care of this. And not thinking that really this is a problem that God should be taken care of, and I should get as much help as possible. And it's on those times that that were the hardest for me, and when I struggled the most.
The biggest obstacle for me now is a time constraint, because it's easy for me to fill my life up with doing lots of things, and making that time for my personal walk with God and my prayer life becomes obstacles when you get so busy with so many other things.
I get in the way of doing things because I want to do them, but then I'll do it later, I'll do this now. I'm the worst person in the world about procrastinating and putting things off. Oh, I'll go do this later, I'll go talk to somebody here later. And I end up failing miserably at that as well.
My biggest obstacle is me. I suppose it would be odd to quote a Pink song, but I'm a hazard to myself. Don't let me get me. I am my own biggest enemy. It can be situations like I mentioned of, I don't know if it's my pride or arrogance, where I think that I can fix my problems and protect everybody else from being associated with it. Or if it's because I feel embarrassed because I don't want people to know that I have weaknesses or that I'm struggling with things.
I always feel like I failed Jesus. As a mom, we feel guilty every time our kids go the wrong direction. And I continue to feel that way. I always feel like I failed Jesus. I can never be good enough. He died for me. And sometimes it's all I can do just to show up and worship Him on a Sunday. I let Him down every day, and He just keeps on forgiving me.
I think I fail Jesus quite frequently in the fact of that I think Jesus is always there, and His blood always washes my sins away, but I don't think I do enough for Him for the sacrifice that He made.
I failed by not being the type of person to go out and tell others about why I'm a Christian. I failed by not being able to hold up my end of the deal going out. I've let Him down so many times because I've let my emotions get the best of me. Believe it or not, I'm a pretty emotional guy. And I've let people down many times. And that's my biggest regret, is not knowing the right time to speak to somebody, and knowing that I've spoke to somebody and that might be the only time in my life that I ever see them or get the chance to influence them, and I screw it up royally. And I have many times.
I feel like I failed Jesus all the time. And like I said, that's the reason I walked away as a young person, is because I felt like I failed Him all the time. But He never fails me. And so you have to learn, you have to ask for forgiveness when you sin and you fall. But you also have to forgive yourself. And that's something I still struggle to do. Because that's my natural inclination, is to just put myself down and tell myself what a terrible person I am. And anytime I sin, that's what happens. It's like, I'm a horrible person, I'm a terrible person, I'm a terrible person, I'm a terrible person. That's what my brain tells me all the time. And so I used to think I'd have to go off and I'd have to feel really bad, and which I did, and then I'd beat myself up for days. And then I would come back and repent and say, okay, God, And it's like I have to punish myself, and that's not how it works at all. You know, as soon as you sin, God's like, hello, I'm right here, let's do it. Let's just come on back right now. Because God doesn't want you to spend a minute away from Him.
You know, we all fall short of the glory of God. We all sin. And while I may be failing in some way, Jesus has not given up on me. Just because I have sinned doesn't mean He hates me. And that's, you know, for me, that's important, because I had grown up in a situation where when you mess up, you know, you're rotten. You know, you're awful. I know I do things that disappoint Jesus, but at the same time I'm encouraged knowing that He's still there, and He's encouraging me to get better, and not smacking me around because I did bad.
I thank God every day for the trials that He has given me. If I had an easy life, my mother was still alive today, if I was raised by an angel my whole life, I think I would just be a robot. I don't think I would have any passion. I don't think I would have any opinions about anything. I would not understand what hardship was. I could not show compassion to other people with the same struggle as me. I wouldn't be as forgiving to other people because people have forgiven me.
I've learned to rely on God more. I've learned to let go and let God. There have been many times when people will come up and say, well, why do you believe in God? Because this has happened in your life. That's why I believe in Him, because He's been there to help me. The more I struggle away, the more I get pulled back. The best example I can say is coming down here. Helga and I were in a conflict of sorts, not her and I, but just things the way our jobs were going at the time. And all of a sudden this door opened up, and then the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. It's like, well, of course God's part of my life. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't. Because He pushed us this way.
My biggest difficulty probably my whole life was losing my little girl. When she was 2 months old, she died in her sleep. And as a Christian, I had two choices. I could get bitter or I could get better. And my husband chose to get bitter, and I chose to get better. And God was faithful to me during that time, even though I didn't understand, and I cried out to God in anger sometimes because my arms were aching for my child. But God redeems the things that we lose, and He has redeemed my daughter many times over. I have so many young girls in my life today that I might not ever have had my daughter lived. And although I don't think that's why it happened, something good can come from something bad.
I've definitely grown as a Christian through difficult times during my life. I think that when you go through difficulties, in the midst of the difficulty, a lot of times you don't realize that you're growing. But when you get past that, you can look back and see that you are growing in your relationship with God, and it's bringing you closer to Him. And then, too, it also makes you understand other people and not be so judgmental when they're going through difficult times.
I have grown spiritually in the last 5 years immensely. Since I moved from Tennessee to Kentucky, my parents had divorced. My dad took me to church every time the church doors are open. Wednesday night, Sunday morning, even Monday night too when we had the youth devotions. He took me to them, and Dad was always on a pedestal, he's always bigger than life to me. And then my mom and Dad told me after we moved up here that they were splitting up, and that was just a very hard thing to do. It was a big hit to my faith, and I read and studied and tried to build myself back up, and I read a little bit more and studied a little bit more. I'm at the point now where I feel there's still room to grow, but the divorce of my parents has been the hardest thing for me to deal with. Even at age 37, fixing to be 38.
As I've gone through struggles, I've actually become a more well-rounded person. And the biggest failures in my life, it seems ironically, have been the greatest sources of strength for me. Sometimes it takes a little bit of falling down to really appreciate what you have. And oddly enough, in some of those situations, I have found myself becoming a better source of encouragement to others, having gone through the struggle myself. I would never intentionally go through what I went through. But in some ways, I'm glad that I went through some of the struggles that I did, because it has caused me to grow as a Christian, and it has been an opportunity where I've been able to help others.